Good morning, everybody. We're letting people in. It is a very pretty Saturday morning. I forget what day it is. It's June 18th. June 18th. It's been a busy week with the council. We had, this is the month of June where we have 3 meetings instead of 2. Gives you a third chance to watch us. We had our second meeting this past week where we had the capital improvements budget up. That's the wish list of items in order for things to get done. Projects that has to be on that in that list. And so we passed that. The council meeting lasted about 35 minutes, and then we got out of there. But the week coming up, we have the operations budget, which I think will take longer. That'll be this coming Tuesday, 6:30. You're all welcome to come down or watch. Should be interesting. Our guest today is somebody who knows a lot about what's in that budget, and that's Kelly Flannery, who is our finance director for the Metropolitan Government. Kelly, thanks. Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So while we're waiting for people to get on, as my guests usually know, I usually ask something irrelevant. What is that thing behind your head? What is that animal? What is it doing?
I'm in my office at the courthouse, and in an effort to make my house a home, I furnished on my own dime, I might add, not taxpayer funded. But that is a black sheep because I feel like I'm a little bit of a black sheep. So I'm still accepting names. I've heard Dolly, but that feels really vanilla. So it's just a black sheep. And then the plant is that's Audrey. It's a Audrey ficus. So
the plant is Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors.
Well, that's what I thought. So the place I bought it, I thought they were being really clever, but it turns out it is the class or genius of fica is actually called an Audrey fica. So
interesting. I have a daughter named Audrey. And she gave birth this week to my first grandson.
Congratulations.
So I thought I was going to be able to announce that at the council meeting, but she hadn't given birth by the time I got out of there. She gave birth on Wednesday morning to a very healthy young man named James. So anyway, I've gotten to hold James a couple of times, and James is doing quite well, and so is Audrey and her husband. So anyway, that's my exciting news. That took way precedence over everything else that was going on last week. So you getting ready? Are you getting ready to say something?
I was gonna say, I don't know. That's more exciting than the story of my black sheep, but okay.
Well, but it looks like there's some blue on that black sheep. It's kind of black and blue. Is that right?
I think it's just the sun coming in. It's black and white check legs and face, and then black fur.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you about that. The other thing I'll ask you about, what is that? The painting behind your head? It's
butterflies. It's just
okay.
I don't know.
Is that your painting, or was that there when you got there?
No, it's also, my predecessor, Mr. Crumbo, was a big art connoisseur, and so he donated a lot of art over here in the finance department. But apparently he had some meaningful art behind me that he was not willing to leave behind. So I have a different appreciation for art in that I bought that on Wayfair.
All right. Well, we know a lot about you now, just from your choices in art. So anyway, well, welcome everybody. It's time to start. Beautiful Saturday morning here in Nashville. It's going to be warm today, but I think it's going to be exceedingly hot next week, and that's just not at the council meeting where we take up the budget. We have Councilmember John Rutherford is on the call. And we'll announce anybody else any other elected officials who pop up. This should be an interesting conversation. This is what I would always call kind of the week before the budget, leading up to the passage of the budget, is one of the most important weeks, I think, for the council. We're never exactly sure what's going to happen, but we're going to talk about that, and we're going to kind of play out maybe what might happen as we go. And I think we have some people who are unmuted. So if everybody will mute their microphones, then we make sure that we have clear communication. Again, our guest today is Kelly Flannery, who is the finance director for the Metropolitan Government. She works closely, obviously, with the mayor's office in terms of how this works, and she works closely with the council because the budget is what kind of governs how we operate in this city. So Kelly, welcome to my show. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so the first question that I always ask all of my guests is, tell us about yourself. Where were you born? What have you been doing with your life? How did you end up sitting in front of a black sheep and some Wayfair painting in Nashville, Tennessee, getting ready in the next couple of days to try to pass a $3 billion budget?
Well, it was a Sunday, June 25th, 1978. We can start there. But no, I grew up and was born in upstate New York, outside Syracuse, and lived there and went to school actually at Syracuse. And my sister went to school outside of Charlotte. So I graduated in 2000 with my undergrad. And Charlotte was like Austin is now, or I guess Charlotte kind of still is. That's where all the finance jobs were. And my undergrad degree was in foreign policy. I don't know what I was thinking I was going to do with that, but so I just followed my sister and fell into, I think people are familiar with Moody's, the rating agency.
Mm-hmm.
They had a whole shop in Charlotte. They had relocated from New York. And this was back when you would apply for jobs in the classified section of your Sunday paper. And so I applied for that job, got that job, and started reading municipal bond documents, the offering statements all day long, and financial reports, the CAFRs, as we call them, the comprehensive annual financial report for every city, town, government in America. And we would harvest all of that data and kind of compile it and sell it to investors and libraries and whoever wanted it. So I did that for a couple of years. And then one day I was like,
how much coffee do you have to drink to do that?
It was the most boring thing on earth.
I've read our reports, and I usually get through the first page and it's like, it's all yours. So you had to read those reports and then write up information about them?
Yeah, you would read them and pull out, on the bond documents, what was the security, what was the purpose of the project, and then just the mechanics, like what was the interest rates, what were the maturity years, all that fun stuff. And then in the CAFRs, the financial reports, it was just, assets, liabilities. I'm making it sound much more exciting than it was. It was worse than your worst imagining of it. But after doing that for a couple of years, I was like, I wonder why governments issue all this debt. Like, what is this all about? So I decided to get my master's in public administration and kind of figure out how do governments make the decision to issue all this debt. So I did that. And then I was like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. Let me put this to work. And I only had work experience, in the private sector. So I needed to go to a government that was big enough that it kind of had its own bond shop. And I said, I'm not going north of Chicago and I'm not going west of Chicago. And Chicago was hiring. So I moved to Chicago and worked in their finance department issuing all the debt. And I started October 1st, 2008, which if you remember where we were, October 1st, 2008, it was about a week after Lehman collapsed. So my first day, the city of Chicago was being called for $500 million in swap termination payments. And I spent the next 11 years there every day thinking that it can't get worse than the day before. And we outdid ourselves. It was a wild ride. So I did that for 11 years. And then Mayor Emanuel announced he wasn't going to run again. So it felt like time to figure out what was next. And then a recruiter called from Charlotte, was looking for a CFO. My family still lives there. So I was like, oh, well, we'll go do that. I thought that would be a nice, fun thing to do because it's the complete opposite financial picture from Chicago, AAA city with plenty of money. And I went and did that for a couple of years and kind of realized that, still chasing that dragon a little bit. There was no real challenge there. They kind of have it all figured out financially. And so Nashville, I feel like a little bit like Goldilocks. Like you've done all the hard work, you've raised the taxes, and now I can come in and be helpful in stabilizing policies and kind of putting us, the way I talk about it is you guys have remodeled the house and now we got to weather strip it. And that's where I think I can be helpful, is how do we build the policies around making sure that we don't erode again.
So what was, maybe you've answered it, but what was so interesting about coming to Nashville? I mean, I know there was a position open, and obviously the mayor was looking and found you. We had heard that you were coming before you probably ever met any of us. But what was so interesting about Nashville that would cause you to leave Charlotte? And I guess your family is probably still in Charlotte, but you came this way.
Well, like I said, my experience in Chicago was very dynamic, and it was, there were days you weren't sure you were going to make payroll, for the entire school system. And it was a lot of every day Rome was burning. And so I thought I wanted to kind of relax and do nothing. And that's why I went to Charlotte, because this will be easy. And I realized that the challenge is more meaningful, than I thought it would be. And so honestly, I thought that meant I was done with government, and that once you've kind of slayed the dragon, what comes next? And then I had a conversation with the mayor's office team about the challenges that were still out there. And I don't know, I just felt like I could be helpful. And then I'd never been to Nashville before. So I came out and they took me on a tour and took me for ice cream, which is always a good way to get me anywhere. And I just felt like it's a really small Chicago. It really is a city of neighborhoods, and you can find your people here. And so it was an easy place to live, and the work's challenging enough, but I don't have to hopefully do it, ask you guys for a 40% tax increase. Like, that's something that I wouldn't have wanted to have to do. So it like I said, it's enough of a challenge that I think I could be impactful, but not harmful.
Good. Did the mayor's office put you on a pedal tavern and let you ride around on that downtown?
So I knew nothing about any of that. I'm not a big music person. I know that that's sacrosanct, but I had no background. So it was a Thursday afternoon, maybe like around 2, and it was maybe August or September. And they just took me on a drive, and all of a sudden we kind of drove through, essentially Times Square in the middle of the day. And I was like, where are we? And they were like, oh, we don't ever come here, but we just wanted to make sure you saw it. But it really is remarkable. Yeah, for the first, and I don't love to drive. So I moved kind of on the outskirts of uptown or downtown, kind of in the Gulch, but not really. So I walk everywhere. And so I see it every day now. And every day it blows my mind.
Every time you say it, do they scream at you and wave like we've never seen that before?
Yeah, they're never an unhappy group. So it's not the worst way to start your day. Everyone's always happy to see you.
We should, at some point, maybe we should get on a pedal tavern and wave at the tourists. Do it kind of a reverse, have them stay there, and then we'll yell at them. What do you think?
The not so secret of the pedal tavern is you don't actually have to pedal it. Like, it's motorized. It will actually go whether you're going to do any manual labor or not. So I'll do that.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you for telling me that. All right. So, so you came to Nashville. You took the job at the end of last summer, beginning of fall.
I guess it was September, October. Yeah.
All right. So this is your first real immersion into Nashville's budget process. So let's, I'll take that second. The first question is, what do you do? What is your role as finance director for the city? Kind of, obviously you're working on the budget, but what do you do overall? What does that mean, being that you're the finance director for Nashville?
Sure. The portfolio of the finance department's really robust. And so there's about 6 or 7 different divisions. So obviously the budget. So we do the budget annually, but that's an ongoing process, managing that process. We do all the investments for the city, and that doesn't just mean, the property taxes that you pay, but it's your water bill, it's the pension fund. And so we manage the pension fund, which is a $4 billion fund. And granted, we have external boards and commissions that help us with that, but all those investments are done in my shop. We issue all the debt and manage the treasury functions. We do purchasing and procurement. So that's another big one. Obviously the financial reporting, payroll. We do payroll not just for metro government, but we also do it for schools. So everyone's, while you think payroll, you only get paid every other week, not everyone's on the same cycle. So we're almost always doing payroll every day. And all the 1099s, all the tax forms that come with all of that, the annual financial report, grant accounting and accountability. So we give a fair amount of funding externally, and we have to make sure those dollars are being allocated appropriately. So we do a lot of auditing of those funds. And then we also, last 2 years, I guess it's been, we house the DEI office, which I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard that, I didn't understand it. But once it was explained to me, I was like, it makes perfect sense for that to live in this operation. And so that's been, I think, the newest thing, in the finance world, you don't see a lot of firsts. And that was one that's new for me. And I've really appreciated that experience. And then we were able to kind of incorporate it into the budget process and looking at things through an equity tool, which is something I've never done in my 20 years before. So it's always nice when a job that's kind of as vanilla as finance to be able to learn something new. So
Well,
that's every day of finance director world.
yeah, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion for people who don't know.
Yes.
And so what is that office? That office, I know is in your shop. And what are they doing? What are they particularly looking for and doing to help in the overall aspects of how the city operates its budget?
Sure. So as part of this process, and we can talk about the process and how we get to the budget that we deliver, but where we ask them to participate is any position that any department was requiring or requesting. What does that look like from an equity perspective, not just to Metro, but to the external citizens and our customers? How are we serving? Is it equitably? And it doesn't mean equally. It doesn't mean because District 1 gets this, the District 4 should get it, because the district's needs might be different. So are we looking at it not just from an equality, but an equity standpoint? And that was a distinction that, honestly, I didn't really appreciate until we started this exercise. So it's been really interesting to learn through that. So, and they're a really small shop. There's only 3 of them right now. And they spent the budget, they created this budget equity tool. They've implemented it. It's been really amazing partners, in addition to their day jobs. And their day jobs is, maintaining DEI work across the organization and all the departments. So I don't know how the 3 of them are doing it, but it's been pretty magical.
So let me ask you this as we kind of move into discussion of how a city budget is put together, and then we'll eventually end up with what we're looking at on Tuesday. But obviously, a budget for a mayor can dictate kind of policy. It can actually, so I know the mayor has different things that he's interested in this budget, whether it's education, whether I know he's got a piece on affordability and housing and so forth. How much do you get into, again, with the budget kind of dictating policy, how much role do you have in terms of policy discussions? Is the mayor sort of driving that in terms of what he's interested in? And then your job is to kind of help formulate that. I guess maybe what I'm asking is, how does your office work with the mayor's office to come up with a budget that's going to be presented to the council?
Sure. And I think the experience I have in being in 2 other governments from this just kind of reiterates that everybody does it different. And I imagine every administration, even within Nashville, has done it a little different. The one thing that the finance director position per charter, my sole thing and purpose in the budget is I set the revenue. That is my sole power. So no one can tell me whether it's higher, it's lower. That is my God-given right. Anything else? Yeah, but when it relates, so I tell them, the mayor's office, here's the number we have, and there are contractual obligations within that. A lot of, well, it's a big number. The operating fund is right almost at 3 billion right now. And that seems like a lot. A lot of it is really prescriptive. A lot of it is existing salaries. Debt service is a really big chunk of it, and contractual costs. So it doesn't leave him a really big pot to kind of drive policy around. But for the most part, that is that office. They have the strategy and the policy wonks, and he has an agenda that he's trying to move forward. And so there's some latitude to that. And, obviously they ask for my input, but for the most part, it's those things that they've run on and they want to make sure they're committed to those.
All right. So I was just thinking, if you're a God-given right through the Metropolitan Charter,
Maybe a charter given right.
okay, maybe it's a charter given right, is to establish how much money you think we're going to pull in revenue in the upcoming year. How do you do that? Tell people how. I mean, first of all, I was thinking, it's like, what if you just took a trip and we couldn't find you? Then we'd have to appoint an interim, because we have to you're the person who gives us the number.
Yeah.
So how do you, with that very important responsibility, because it is, how do you figure that out? And explain to people what you're looking at, because it's a number that you're guessing basically for next year.
Yeah, and it's not a one-time a year process, so it's all year round. And so there's really two huge revenue sources in the operating budget. That's property tax and sales tax. And for the most part, property tax, pretty easy one to predict. There's, some give and take around what's the new level of property tax that's going to come online. But for the most part, Nashvillians are really good about paying their property taxes. You make some assumptions about the tax percentage being paid, but that's not really materially moving the needle. The sales tax has really been the unknown, right? And not just for me, but for my predecessor. So remember where you were in your life in May 2020. Imagine trying to predict what the next 12 months sales tax revenues were going to be while we're in lockdown. And so that's a struggle, and thankfully those came out a little better. But here I am in April is when we put our budget out, and in April, the economic picture looks very different than where the economic picture looks right now on June 18th from what I presented. So when I made that prediction back in April, I was what I thought super conservative, and now I'm starting to feel like we're in a good space, but that's kind of the struggle of doing revenue projections, is you have to plan for the unknowns. And so we rely not just on our internal economists, but the Boyd School at UT in Knoxville, which is kind of the preeminent organization. They focus primarily on Tennessee, but they're pretty well renowned around the country. They do the state's projections as well. And so we rely on a lot on them. I have the benefit of having been a lot of different places, so I can pull resources that we haven't typically used just to kind of gut check, this is the time where the economy is so in flux, to be thankful that you have those sources. So I've pulled, Wells Fargo did a lot of work for me, which is nice because they're not in this space at all. They don't have a presence here. So for them to come in with fresh eyes and kind of gut check and give us some projections was really helpful. It really is, economists like to think it's a science, but there's a lot of art to it too. And sometimes it's just, putting your finger up to the wind and hoping for the best. But this is a really challenging time to go into it. And especially when the growth in the current year has been so high, to try and tell people we got to be really careful. I appreciate it's a hard thing for people to hear, but that's going to be my challenge over the next 4 days.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. I'm actually a product of state government, and the state has a funding board, which has certain people meet, and then they get together and figure out what they think based upon best evidence from different groups, including a group that used to come out of Knoxville, maybe the same group.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so these people are making presentations to this group that is meeting out in the public, and they're trying to figure out what they think is the proper rate, the percentage growth in terms of the state budget. Same type of thing. I mean, do you call a meeting with the various groups, and then also, they sit around a table and they're saying, I think it's going to grow, 4%. I think it's going to grow 8%. How do you take all that information that you're getting and then come up with your recommendation?
Lots of spreadsheets. It's not that formal of a process. There's not, one big day where we all sit down together. But like I said, we give them data throughout the year because a lot of it is specific to Nashville and they don't have it. So they rely on what we give them as much as anything. But we talk about it throughout, and as it got closer, in mid-April, they finally, they submit a final report, and it's not just those two revenues, it's by every, we have hundreds of revenues, and it's revenue by revenue. And then, I can say the growth expectation is 4% for the organization, but it's very different by funding. So, the sales tax number is more 7%, 8%, but some of the other ones are much lower. They're not, so we look at them one by one by one by one. And what do they all look like? And then we, sometimes you push a little bit, like, what, are you sure this one's right? And there's some where I'll push, I think we're too conservative. And there's some where I'm like, I think we might be too aggressive. It really is, everyone has their view, and everyone has the opportunity, but at some point, I mean, that's the beauty and the frustration of a budget is it's one moment in time. And that's kind of been my struggle with the length of this process, 12 weeks or 10 weeks when it's all said and done. At some point, having that much time affords people a lot of time to review, but it allows a lot of things to change. And so I almost wish it were shorter so that we could stop trying to kind of chase ourselves a little bit.
All right.
Especially in this kind of economic condition.
Yeah. So let's talk about this economic condition. All right. So the mayor, there's a date in time where you provide the mayor with what you think is going to be the estimated revenues for fiscal year 23, the year coming forward. And so that's what the mayor then uses to figure out, because the budget has to balance. That's what the mayor's office would figure based upon operational revenues, what they can spend. All right, so that goes into a certain time that you tell the mayor's office, and then they present the budget. And we'll go back to the budget for just a minute, in just a minute. But I guess the question here would be, okay, so that's sometime in April. We're sitting here on June the 18th. And, back in April, there was a war going on in Ukraine. But since then, the war is still going on in Ukraine, but gas prices have gone through the roof, and inflation, that's the first story on the news. That's what everybody's talking about. Now you've got the Fed jumping the rates. That's all happened within the last couple of weeks. And so your estimate, though it may have been conservative at the time, things changed before the time you made the estimate, and now right now. What powers do you have, and what do you do? I mean, if this country heads to a recession, Nashville has always had a history of it's one of the last to feel the effects, and it's when the first comes back. But we never know. So what is your job through the next 4 days and then through the next year to make sure that we are careful and we don't overspend?
Sure. And I just, in the same way that we work with our external economists to get revenue projections, I also do the same to the mayor's office. I don't just come to him one day and say, here's the number. It's starting about January, February. I'm probably meeting at least every other week, maybe every week towards the end, kind of refining those numbers. So the number I gave him in January, he and I both know, wink, wink, that I'm giving him a made up number, and then I'm holding out on him, but we refine it closer. So they're not waiting until, April to build their budget. They're soft. We're all kind of doing it at the same time. But between now and 4 days from now, like I said, we're conservative in that budget because we knew there was going to be some like inflation isn't brand new. It was there in April, but there was assumptions I made around the Fed action. We thought there'd be 100 basis points between now and June, and it ended up being 125. Is that more? For sure. And that doesn't really change my assumptions on some of the debt assumptions I had made. But what that does do is, how is that going to impact housing prices? How is that going to impact revenue, on more of our revenue side of the house? Once the budget, between now and Tuesday, it doesn't change anything. We've been conservative enough. As long as you and your 39 brethren can hold the line and not kind of raid some of the reserves that we might have to rely on, we should be fine. But what we can do throughout the year is where we always have the ability to go back and amend the budget. And we've had the benefit the last 2 years to be able to go back and amend it up because revenues have been great, but we can amend it down, or we could be less restrictive and just implement our own hiring freezes or our own capital spending freezes. And those are things that we did do in during the pandemic. And so those are the first levers to kind of pull. And we, like I said, we monitor, we're seeing our tax revenues. We don't wait for the end of the year. They come in every month. Even though we don't see cash, it's typically the cash comes in arrears. We have the figures, so we know, projectually where we're going.
You come in every morning after you walk to the office and take a look at the futures market, and then I remember the state treasurer always had the computer screens on and was watching the market. Do you do?
I used to have a Bloomberg terminal at my old job, and it's very, very expensive. And I just don't think the value is there. So, and I don't do it in the way I used to. But I do have a TV, and I do keep it on CNBC and Bloomberg News.
Okay.
So
Right.
I am watching, but you're
not watching Nickelodeon, right?
No, but
Okay.
I think we're, while the fund balances aren't where they should be, we are in a much better position than we were before, where if we're at the point where I got to watch the market every single day, we're in real trouble, and we're not at that point.
Okay, that's good. All right, one other question, and I'm gonna ask you about the fund balances, and then we will actually talk about the budget process before I let the whole hour get away.
I can talk the bark off a tree, by the way.
Okay, well, we'll just keep talking then. All right, so I know the answer to this question, but the question is, what if the council disagrees with your number, your revenue projection?
They can't do anything with my revenue projection. It is what it is. But what I can't do is I can't keep council from rating fund balance.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's makes me real nervous.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because that is an issue. And I'll just tell you, because we're probably going to run out of time, but I glanced at the amendments that have been proposed, and I think there are amendments that are trying to raise the fund balance to actually fund projects. The way this works, I'll give you a quick scenario, is the budget is presented on Tuesday. Berkeley Allen is our budget chair. She will present it, unless there's some problem, we'll bring it up first, so we can go ahead and get it done. We'll bring it up first. Berkeley will move the budget, and then she'll move her substitute, which is a combination of working with the mayor's office and the council to make some modifications in what was proposed. So she's got the substitute, and then there are amendments that follow behind it. And we can talk through that in just a second. But in order to explain that or talk about that, maybe you need to explain what the fund balances are and why you keep bringing them up on this conversation. Obviously, because you feel like they're very, very important. And during the workshops at the council, you brought them up every 5 seconds. Okay, go ahead.
So fund balance is actually not a construct of budget. It is not a number that is derived from the budget. It's not anything to do with the budget. The fund balance is calculated one time a year. It is after all of our revenues and all of our expenses are done as of June 30th, here's what's left over. And that number doesn't actually come out till closer to November or December. Because as I said, while we know what our revenue collections are, we collect in arrears. So when you go to Target and buy something, you pay sales tax. Target isn't receipting to the state every single night at the end of the night. Every month they're receipting, then the state has it for a month, then it comes to us. So in the month of June, we're actually collecting March receipts. So we don't actually receive cash through June 30th until September or October. So the most recent actual cash fund balance is as of June 30th, 2021. That's cash we actually have on hand. And fund balance by design is for emergencies. And that's not a construct unique to Nashville. That is government-wide. It is, some people call it a rainy day fund. It's technically, the accounting term is undesignated fund balance. So right now, as of June 30th, 2021, we have 3 funds that are kind of the general fund pot. So it's the general district and the school district are the 2 big, right? And so there's $375 million, which sounds like a whole lot. And it is a whole lot compared to 2020, because in 2020, it was only $88 million. So it went from 88 to 375. And that is not a product of the property tax raise. It's not like we raised taxes to gin up the fund balance. It was because two things: the pandemic, no one knew how to project revenues at that point. So the numbers came in higher. And then the recovery was so much more robust than anyone ever thought. So, and we had implemented a hiring freeze and some capital spend freezes in that year because we didn't know what was going to happen. So we ended up much better. So at 378 million, you're saying, oh, Kelly, we've got plenty of money, but we really don't, because the operating budget is currently contemplated is $2.5 billion. So at 378 million of it, best practice per the state comptroller, the Government Finance Officers Association, which sounds so dorky, but I swear is like a meaningful organization world, and they're actually worldwide. They recommend not less than 2 months operating. So that means, and just like your normal payroll, like your own personal life, you're always supposed to have 2 months of expenses saved up, in case you get fired or something happens in your life. And government subscribes to that same philosophy. We should have 2 months worth in case for some reason the wheels fall off. So for us, that number, that minimum bar at 2 months is 435 million. But we only have 378 million. So we don't currently have enough to scratch that 2 month itch, which is a problem. But I can get okay with it because we do have a fund balance policy that was passed by council in the 90s, and it only requires 5%, which is, we can all agree, well below, where it should have been. And even before we really knew what the economic picture looked like for 2023, it was remarks that I had made in my presentation back in April, was we have to revisit this policy and come up with something more meaningful. And I think that 2 months operating is our bare minimum. But living in the policy we currently have, council should not violate its own policy and should maintain at least 5% in fund balance reserves regardless. And again, I will argue till the end of days that is not enough, but I appreciate the policy is what it is. So as long as we stay within that policy, I'm comfortable until we can correct the policy. And the second piece of that same policy is the requirement that we have a structurally balanced budget. And that's the part that is not negotiable for me. That is in the comptroller's recommendations. That's in every GFOA, the Government Finance Officer's recommendation. And that says that your current year's expenditures have to match your current year's revenues. So you can't rely on money sitting in fund balance to pay recurring costs. So it's like saying if you, in your personal life, had a car payment and you didn't, your paycheck doesn't cover your car payment, but your cousin's going to pay it for you every month, and relying on that. You can't do that. You got to rely on your own dollars to pay for your own costs every year. And that's in the policy, and any violation of that, I'm not going to be supportive of. And so there's been some suggestion that we can use fund balance to cover some of these wish list items. And as long as they're not recurring costs, like if it's a one-time Jim Shulman fund and he wants to, give everyone a black sheep for their desk, as part, then it's crazy, but I'm okay with it because it's within our policies and it's not a recurring cost. Now, if Mr. Shulman wanted to buy everyone a black sheep every single year and it's a recurring cost, I'm not okay with him using fund balance for it because it's not a recurring revenue source. And
what you're balance is the amount of money in the fund balance. You really don't want you don't want the council to be using that really, because you want the fund balance up. You'd like it to be at what it would be 20%. Is that the right? I mean, it's 2 months.
2 months is like 17 or 18%.
Okay, so
yeah.
you want to get it to 2 months is what you want, and
Yeah,
it's not yet. It's a little short, but it's not.
In the spirit of living within the policies that we have, trying not to be completely pragmatic. I say, as long as we live within the 5 for now, and I think it's a terrible idea, but this is the deal the cards we have right now. Let's at least subscribe to the structurally balanced philosophy.
Yeah, so you don't really want anybody touching that, but if it does, then what you're concerned about, and obviously I assume you've studied what Nashville did over the last 5-8 years, when it was running into trouble financially, it sold one-time assets to use to balance the budget, which put us in the hole, gave away an asset, but it also put us in the hole the next year because it was just one-time funds. So that's what you're, at this point, until the other policy changes, you don't want us raiding funds and using them for recurring expenditures. We can use them for one-time funds. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, so if the folks watching this go back and watch some of the budget hearings and some of the workshops, you'll see Miss Flannery repeating that over and over again. We were just waiting for her sometimes just to pipe up on the microphone and say that. Okay. Having said all that, the process of putting together the budget, just kind of quickly walk through. So obviously, you have had that discussion with the mayor about how much you think the revenues are going to be. You define it, you refine it, you keep working on it. And then at some point, because of the charter says, hey, Mr. Mayor, or Miss Mayor, you have got to get us a budget by a certain date and give it to the council. And then the council has 2 months to work on it after that, and they have to pass something by June 30th. A number is said, this is the number. You work off of that. What does your office do in terms of helping put together that budget? And then what becomes your role after that as the council then takes it and then starts working through it?
Sure. So once we give the mayor the number, and it's not public, right? It's just all internal. We, the budget office, it's a division of finance, reaches out to all the departments, and there's about 50 of them, and a mix of elected and appointed, and there's a crew, and everyone puts in their budget. But we usually, we don't ask for wish list budgets. We usually put some sort of guardrails on there. So if you had an extra 2%, how would you spend that? If you got reduced 2%, what would that look like? If you're requesting positions, why? And we give departments that time, and they bring all that back. And then we don't just, arbitrarily decide. We then have meetings with each of the departments, and those meetings include representatives from the mayor's office, HR, finance department, of general services, because there's often requests for things related to fleet needs or people, and so we let all the kind of IT is a big one too. There's a lot of IT, so we have kind of all the administrative departments participate in these budget hearings, internal budget departmental hearings, when people are explaining their requests, so that we can see, like, if police, fire, and water are all asking for TVs or something, then IT could be like, okay, there's an opportunity for us to, do volume purchasing. Like, there's just value in us all being on the calls together, so that when we're compiling the budget, we're leveraging all the resources we can. So that's how we come up with it. And so it's how do we get the necessary things out first, and then we move on to what are the nice to have kind of things, and how do we decide if we're going to fund those? And that's really where we're leaning into kind of the mayor's priorities. If we know that we've got an extra $1 million and everybody wants an extra position, what is the most meaningful for the community, but what also helps drive his priorities? And that's kind of where we're punting to the mayor's office to opine. But the budget office does the actual operations work. It's physically building the documents and putting that all out on kind of the behalf of the mayor's office. And then that goes to council. And do we want to start in the next part of the process? Or? Yeah,
so the council gets, so the mayor, I'll take part of it. The mayor has the state of Metro address. This year it was in Antioch, and it was April the 27th, I think. And it's always kind of a big production. And then, the mayor basically outlines in general during his speech or her speech, what what they're interested in their budget. And then the actual document, which you have helped put together, is then given to the council, and the council starts working through it. And it's got May through June. So what is your role during that period of time when the council is actually receives the document and starts working through it with departments and starts having workshops and things like that?
Yeah, so like I said, we do get our departments' input on their suggestions, but a lot of it is kind of at the discretion of the budget office and the mayor's office. So as much as council is digesting the document, to some extent, so are the departments, because they didn't, in most cases, get what they asked for. So a lot of those first couple of weeks is kind of being the liaison, both back to the departments, here's what we gave you, here's why, and then also doing that same work for council. Here's why we gave them, here's why, and making sure we're all understanding why those decisions were made. And I don't know if anyone's ever had the pleasure of reviewing the budget document, but it's 800 pages. And it's not, and this is not unique to Nashville, this is everywhere I've ever worked. It's not a super intuitive document. So a lot of it is just explaining where to find things, how to read things, so that you and your colleagues can actually come up with meaningful questions. And we're always looking for ways to make that document better. So we're open to that.
We always, every question we have is meaningful. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And so then once we go into budget hearings with departments, you know, I think the finance and budget office role at that point is to kind of serve both of you again in that same capacity. Here's where it is. And I think where we've pivoted to now at this part of the process is, as the chair has submitted her substitute and your amendments have come in, is that I am more of a resource and less of an opinion at this point. This is your budget at this point, and I am just a kind of a resource to answer questions, but I can't provide a lot more recommendations. Like the document that we presented to you is our recommendation. From here on out, I'm just a resource, hopefully.
All right. So you can, though, obviously during the workshops, I mean, there are certain things, as you just said, you have certain concerns. And so part of your job, your responsibility is if the council, I mean, there's certain funds that we can't touch, or there's certain things that we can't get to, or there's contractual provisions on other stuff. It's like, yeah, let's do this and take money from this. It's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. So part of it is keeping the council informed as to if we start heading in some direction that we're not supposed to be going, you know, whether it's you, whether it's Metro Legal, whoever it is trying to make sure that we don't do anything that we can't do. We can't take money from something that you can't get a hold of. But at some point, I mean, this is a good question, and we're going to see it. We're going to see it probably play out on Tuesday. There are amendments that may be coming that the budget chair and the budget committee are going to have to figure out what they're going to do. My guess is that the chair and other members of the committee, if there are concerns about certain things, you'll be asked to address them. But at some point, it does become, it's the council's budget at this point to pass or not to pass or to change. And so we go from there.
I think this is when it's nice to be the new person, because I truly am an agnostic at this point. You know, I have no passion for any of the projects that you guys have. It is solely just me making financial recommendations. So it's irritating, but it's also a really nice place to be, because I
Do we need to, do your hands need to be strapped down so you don't come out of your chair as we're discussing things? Or are you okay?
I'm okay, but I don't know. I'm a morning person, and I keep hearing that this might go all night, and I don't know. If I don't get my sleep, I don't know how it's gonna go.
Would you like us to, would you like me to make a recommendation to the council and just ask them if they don't mind coming back in the morning, just to make you happier?
No, because I am getting out of town on Wednesday, so I need this to be done on Tuesday.
Okay, well, if you're getting out of town on Wednesday, okay, then we'll see what we can do to help your schedule.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so we have until June 30th to pass this budget. And we have, and in the past, we've run into problems where we've had to come back. It doesn't usually happen. The other thing, and I told a group this morning, because I was talking to One Nashville about this, And we'll see how this plays out. It's changed over time. You're going to see this for the first time, but the way it used to work, and I'll just be honest about, I think most people who follow this kind of understand. For years, the same process would play out, but then the budget chair, after listening to what everybody talked about and what everybody wanted, the budget chair would kind of figure it all out and then would present it to the budget committee. And it used to be done a long time ago, not as open as it should have been. Let's just say it that way. That process changed over time to becoming a full-fledged open discussion about the wants of people. That's why we have a public hearing on the budget. We actually had 2 this year. We did it before the mayor even submitted a budget, so we could get more information coming in. But then there's this general discussion about, the substitute and the amendments as a whole. For years, my understanding of when I first got on the council, budget chair, worked through the substitute, came up with the plan, and then the budget committee kind of stayed together and, said, this is the substitute. They would look at the amendments, but unless there was some way to fix it, they would table the amendments and the council would pass the substitute. That doesn't happen very much anymore, at least not in the last several years. There's been multiple budgets. People presented their own budgets, and there's a number of amendments, and there's a number of amendments this time. Now, I've gone through each amendment. What I need to go back is look to try to figure out, some of the amendments look like they may have been taken care of maybe in the substitute, so they'll be withdrawn. But there are some that are different. What is the role? I mean, at this point, it's now the council's to try to figure out. Again, I guess I go back to, it's your job to look at the amendments and just understand what they're doing. And if you do see concerns, then you want to express your concerns. But at this point, it's up to the council to determine whether it wants to put the amendments on or not.
Yep, that's exactly right. So there's only a couple amendments that I've seen that don't functionally work, right? They violate our own policy. And that I'm not opining onto, the legitimacy of funding it. I'm just saying, is this funding source available? Yes or no? It is, again, in my experience, it's either, so I've done a city manager form of government and then I've done a strong mayor. And I know you think 40 is a lot, but Chicago had 50. So I'm used to the volume of council members.
We can bring in 10 additional people.
So in each entity, so in Charlotte, there was a straw votes process, which would be kind of like what we just did through the budget workshops. And then in Chicago, it's the opposite. It's an amendments process, where council does what you guys are doing now, but you're doing both. So it's like that's kind of strange, unusual. How about that? And that you're kind of getting 2 bites at the apple. And so to your point of where the budget chair used to kind of bring a budget, that functionally kind of makes more sense to me, because it feels like we've already done the homework once and now we're doing it again through this amendments process. And a lot of the amendments that I've seen were things that we already covered in workshops that there was a pretty large turnout. You were there. I mean, there were most days. I was shocked at the volume of people that turned out. So now to see them kind of all there again and to contemplate, maybe we don't vote on Tuesday and going another week. It's like, but we've kind of already done all of this work. So that's why I worry about how the economy changes the longer we keep pushing and keep discussing the same things over and over. I just totally went and gave you my own viewpoint. I'm sorry.
No
Not
problem.
the question, but that was the answer.
Well, but I do think, I think it's important for us to understand, because the budget committee and the process has changed over time. I think it used to be more of what you just said, maybe that where you do spend a tremendous amount of time. And I think Berkeley Allen has done a magnificent job of trying to bring people in. And I was surprised as well. I mean, the third workshop, I think, had 23 people in there. So amazing. I mean, we got 39 members. That's tremendous. So I think that's a great thing. And what the chair was doing was listening. You notice she would ask questions, but she was listening to what people wanted, and she let everybody have a chance to have their say. And I mean, we don't have unlimited resources, so we have to pick and choose, and that's what she did. And now she's unveiled. She did what she thought she could do within the confines of the budget. And now we've got amendments that are asking for the same thing that she said. She looked and said, I can't do that this time. Now, some, again, I think have been taken care of. We'll see. It should be an interesting meeting on Tuesday. We'll be ready to go. I would suggest that you bring a pillow, just in case you get tired. But I think, my guess is that we'll move through quicker than we think. If we do get stuck, we built in time so that we can always come back. Because I think it's only happened once in the city's history where we did not pass a budget. And it was close. It happened a couple of years ago. But I think in this case, if we don't pass a budget, then the mayor's budget becomes in place, and we lose out on some of the things that I think the council wants to put in. So we'll see. We'll see where we go. This has been really, really interesting. Kelly, I really appreciate you being on this call. The council member Rutherford sent a message just a minute ago, and I think he said that this should be required watching. Let's see, required viewing for every council member. Yes. So anyway, we may send it out to everybody, make everybody watch it, and then we'll have a quiz on it and see if they can get it before on Tuesday night. Let me ask you, we have 3 minutes left. So I've been thinking about that sheet back there, that black sheet.
Yeah.
Why do you have a black sheet? Why do you think you need a black sheet? Is there some reference to it? Do you think, is there something that you can tell us about why you would have a black sheet on your desk?
So I think in general, and not specific to my Nashville experience, but I think in general, being a finance officer or CFO, you always have to be pragmatic, right? You're always have to be a no. And so I always try and say, I like to come from a place of yes. And unfortunately, people are always so predisposed to like, let's not tell her to the end so that she has to do it. And I'm always like, if you tell me at the front, I'll start off at a yes. But I think it makes me a little bit of a black sheep in that I always try and be as entertaining as I possibly can, because I know I'm always going to have to say no. And so people are always surprised at what they get because they think I'm going to be this really stiff, stodgy person. And I was actually class clown, 1996, Cazenovia High School, and I wear that with a badge of honor. So I think it's a little bit of a departure from what you normally would expect from your finance professional, and that maybe I lack some professionalism.
That was your what do they call those things?
Superlative.
Superlatives. Your class superlative. You were the class clown.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna make sure that the council.
Now there were only like 110 people in my graduating class, so it wasn't much of a victory. But I do believe that if it been a larger class, I still think I would have won.
All right, last question for you.
Okay.
You've been in Nashville for less than a year, but and so you've come in at a time. I mean, I've been here for over 40 years. I've seen, I lived with for a long time. I love the fact that Nashville seemed like a bunch of small neighborhoods that had been put together in a big city, but not with a lot of big city issues. But you moved from Charlotte. I mean, I remember I was in Charlotte a couple of years ago and walking around on Saturday, and it was pretty quiet downtown. I'm not going downtown. Just, we don't necessarily do that unless we've got something to do or we have tourists in town. We want to take them down there. What's been your experience with Nashville in the last, 7 to 8 months? You glad you're here? Obviously, you'll say yes, but what do you think? What do you think about your first initial impressions of the city?
I think I said at the beginning, it really is a city of neighborhoods, and it's very Chicago like that, and that you can find your people anywhere. I think the challenge I have is someone who doesn't know anyone, and the way that I get out is, I like to walk places, like that's how I explore, and there isn't a lot of ability to kind of traverse the neighborhoods. It's a lot of, you gotta drive places, and then, so that's been my only kind of complaint, and that's not unique to Nashville. That was my Charlotte experience as well. Like there isn't like a robust, for a city that's gotten, I think it snuck up on us pretty quickly. Like we got really big, really fast, and we just haven't really caught up on that space. And that's the part that has really only been my only complaint. And it's not really a complaint. Like I'm super blessed in that I have the ability, I have a car, I can drive. I just would elect not to, but I appreciate that that's not an opportunity that everyone has. And I think that's going to be a transit and transportation, or, I know the mayor talks a lot about like getting to Murfreesboro and stuff like that. I'm more concerned about just within the existing confines. How do we get around? Because even on Broadway, the sidewalk's about this wide, and parts of it. And I'm in the street sometimes, that's where the real opportunity is for me there, which is weird because I saw an amendment wanting to throw a whole bunch more money at WeGo that I don't support. So I like that I just said that, and I'm saying, but yeah, that's my only complaint. Otherwise, it's been great.
Well, we're glad you're here. We're glad you took on this very, very important role. Kelly Flannery, our finance director for the Metropolitan Government, thank you. We will, if we're not talking to you over the weekend, we'll see you on Tuesday at the council meeting. Everybody is encouraged to watch. It really is. I mean, this is Nashville's budget. This is what kind of directs where we go and has policy implications. And we'll see how long we're there on Tuesday night. It may be a quick meeting, maybe a longer meeting. But Kelly, thank you. And thank you for the information. I think it's been great. I hope people do watch, the people who weren't on, because it really does explain quite a bit about how we function and how this whole thing works. So I hope you have a good day. I hope it's calm over the weekend and on the holiday Monday. And we will be around on Tuesday. Our guest next week is Sylvia Gagner, who is with the Green Gourmet. So we'll relax after the budget. We'll be talking about something kind of completely different. And that's what we do on this show. We mix it up. But for now, I think most eyes in terms of government are watching Tuesday. So anyway, everybody enjoy the holiday weekend, get some rest. We got a big night on Tuesday night. All right. Thanks, Kelly. Have a great rest of the weekend. All right. Everybody be safe.